Hello everyone, and welcome once again to Caleb Likes Books. I am Caleb, and today I'm going to be doing a top 10 video for you, a bit of a different top 10 from what I have done in the past. And that is going to be my top 10 most anticipated reads of 2023. Now that we have entered the final month of 2022, now in December, I decided I would take a look ahead to 2023 and take a look at the books in my collection that I am most excited to read. Now, there are a couple of caveats to this list. First one, these are books that I already own, so I'm not including books that are releasing in 2023. I'm not including books that I have not yet read or series that I have not yet started that I don't own. There are some here, in fact, many of these are for a series that I have not started yet, but they are books that I already own, so I've already committed to reading them. So this isn't anything that I don't already have. These are all books that I do already have. And also, none of these really have anything to do with 2023 releases. There is one book on here where the final entry in the series may be releasing in 2023. I don't know for sure. But that's really the only case where any of these are going to be having anything to do with new releases. These are all either standalone books that have been out for a little while or books in series that have already concluded. First up at number 10, I have a Star Wars novel, the first of 5 Star Wars novels on this list, because I have a lot of Star Wars novels that I need to read. And that is Leia, Princess of Alderaan by Claudia Gray. This is a canon novel. I believe it's a YA novel. I have read, I think, 4 of Claudia Gray's Star Wars books so far, those being Master and Apprentice, Lost Stars, The Fallen Star, and Into the Dark. And I have thoroughly enjoyed all of those. So, of course, this being a Claudia Gray book, I am excited to read it for that reason, but also I have heard some incredible things about this, both that it is one of her best Star Wars books, and also that it's one of the best canon books in general. So I'm very much looking forward to reading this. It sounds kind of interesting. Leia is a character that I know quite a bit about her story in Legends, but not so much in the canon, so it'll be interesting to see how that goes. And overall, I'm just really looking forward to reading this one. Next up is the only book on this list that is not fantasy or Star Wars, which is a bit interesting, but it's one that I've wanted to read for many years and have finally gotten my hands on a few months ago. And that is the Inferno by Dante Alighieri. This is a very different one because, as I said before, the genre is different. But also, it's more of like a epic poem. I'm not sure if that's the exact, if it is an epic poem, but it's written in a poetic form. It's not really necessarily a novel or anything like that. But it's one that I've wanted to read for a very long time. Just the concept behind this book and the very small bits and pieces that I have read of it over the years, I've just found very interesting, and I've been wanting to read the whole thing for quite a while. But yeah, overall, I'm just looking forward to reading this one. Don't really have much else to say about it. Just have been wanting to read it for a while, so I'm very much looking forward to doing so in 2023. Next up, we have another Star Wars book, this time part of the Legends or EU continuity, and that is The Truce at Batuu. This is a standalone Legends book, and it's, from what I've heard, basically takes place directly after Return of the Jedi, which is super interesting to me. I'm really interested in seeing how the events of Return of the Jedi kind of play out directly afterwards, especially where this takes place so soon after the original trilogy. It'll just be very interesting to see what happens directly next. So really looking forward to reading this one. Next, we have another Legends novel, and that is Red Harvest by Joe Schreiber. Now, this is one that I got quite recently. If you've seen my November book haul video, this is one of the books that I got in November. And I've been really looking forward to reading this one for a few reasons. First of all, it's a horror Star Wars novel, which strikes me as very interesting. There's not very much of that. There's elements of horror in some Star Wars books, but you don't really get much Star Wars horror. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out with this. Also, it's a very Sith-centric story from what I've heard, which I love Sith-centric stories. I love the Darth Bane trilogy. I love Darth Plagueis. I'm very excited for The Acolyte, which is an upcoming show that is supposed to be very Sith-centric. I just love stories that are centered around the Sith. So that also is very interesting to me, and it takes place in the Old Republic, which is probably my favorite era in all of Star Wars. So I'm really looking forward to reading this one. I've read one other book by this author, which was Maul Lockdown, which I loved, so hopefully I will love this one as well. Moving away from the Star Wars books for just a second, I now have the first fantasy novel on this list, and that is Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne. Now, I have never read John Gwynne before, but I have heard a lot of great things about both this series and his Faithful and the Fallen series, which I will probably also read at some point if I end up enjoying this one. This is the first book in a trilogy. The third entry has not come out yet, but I'm hoping that I really enjoy this so that I can kind of read the whole trilogy. It's a Nordic-inspired fantasy, which sounds very, very intriguing to me. And that's something that I've been wanting to read a bit more of for quite a while now. And I've talked to a few people who have read this book, and they absolutely loved it. I've seen some reviews on YouTube from different booktubers who have said they have loved it. So it all kind of leads me to believe that I am going to probably enjoy this one very much, and I hope I do. So I'm very much looking forward to reading this one in 2023. Next up is another Star Wars novel, which is the first entry in a trilogy, and that is Thrawn by Timothy Zahn. This is the first Thrawn novel that was written for the canon, and it will also be my first exposure to Thrawn in the canon. I know he played a role in the Star Wars Rebels TV show, which I have not seen, so it'll be interesting to see how Thrawn is handled in the canon. I have heard some kind of mixed things about this trilogy, but one thing that I have heard from everybody that I've seen talk about the trilogy is that the first book is really, really good. So I'm really looking forward to reading it, and it's Timothy Zahn. He always delivers, I think, on an enjoyable story, so I'm sure I will enjoy this one. Moving back into fantasy once again, we have the first entry in a series that I am very much looking forward to read, and one that I have been quite intimidated by, but I am still very much looking forward to, and that is Gardens of the Moon by Steven Erikson, the first book in the Malazan Book of the Fallen series. Now, Malazan is a series that I have heard a lot of things about. I've heard a lot of criticism for it, but I've also heard a lot of praise for it. People who have said that if you just push your way through the series, because it is a very difficult fantasy series for a lot of people, if you just push through, it will be well worth it, and it will be fantastic. So I'm hoping that I do really enjoy this series because of all of the good things that I've heard about it. And it just sounds super intriguing to me. I am, of course, very intimidated by it because it's, first of all, a fairly long series. It's 10 books. But also because Steven Erikson's writing style, I have heard, is kind of difficult to get into. And the way that the world building works in this series is apparently kind of difficult. But I am still really looking forward to reading this series and reading this first entry. I've got another fantasy book here for my number 3, and this one is actually not the first entry in the series because I have already read the first book, but that is all I've read at this point. And that is The Wheel of Time with The Great Hunt, Book 2. I currently have Book 2 and Book 3 in my collection, so I will be reading both of those, and I'm hoping I will also get some of the other books in the series sometime soonish, because I am definitely intending to continue with the series. I loved The Eye of the World, which is the first book in the series, and I have heard that this is just a really incredible series in general. The Wheel of Time kind of seems like the quintessential modern fantasy series, or not even necessarily modern fantasy because it started in the 90s, but kind of bridging the gap between classic fantasy and modern fantasy, and it's one of the biggest fantasy series out there. So I'm very much looking forward to continuing it. Number 2, I have another Star Wars book, the final one on this list, and it is once again a series that I actually have already started. It is the 4th book in a 19-book series, and that is Star Wars New Jedi Order. This specific book being next is Hero's Trial by James Luceno. If you have seen one of my past book haul videos, I believe it was for September, I got a whole ton of EU books, and many of them were for the New Jedi Order. They were books that were sprinkled throughout the series, so I don't have, like, the next books after this one. I still need to get the second book in the Agents of Chaos duology and the books following that. But I do have quite a lot of the New Jedi Order now, so I'm very much looking forward to continuing the series. I really enjoyed the first 3 books. I thought all 3 of them were really, really good, and I've heard a lot of great things about the series in general, and just based on the 3 that I've read, I really enjoyed them, so I am very much looking forward to continuing the series. But that, of course, brings us to number 1, which is Mistborn Era 2 by Brandon Sanderson, starting with The Alloy of Law. I absolutely loved the first era of Mistborn. It was, at the time that I read it, my favorite books that I had ever read, and then I read Warbreaker, which basically took that spot away from Mistborn. I consider still, at this point, Warbreaker is probably my favorite of Brandon Sanderson's works that I have read currently, although the one that I'm currently reading, which is The Way of Kings, may dethrone it, but we'll see. I also read Elantris, loved that one as well, and so I went ahead earlier this year and bought the first 3 books in Mistborn Era 2. I have not gotten The Lost Metal yet. I'll probably hold off on that until I've read everything else, because people have said that is very much like Cosmere focused, and there's a lot of references and things in that I think would be best for me to read that after everything else. But I am very much looking forward to starting the Mistborn Era 2 or the Wax and Wane series. It sounds very interesting, the changes in the setting. It takes place a couple hundred years after Era 1. Technology has advanced and all that stuff, and I'm very interested in seeing how that plays into the magic system. And it's more Brandon Sanderson, who at this point is probably my favorite author. So I am just really excited to continue diving more into his work. So yeah, The Alloy of Law and the rest of Mistborn Era 2, at least in terms of the books that I already own, is my most anticipated read of 2023. So that is pretty much it for this video. Let me know down in the comments if you have read any of these books and series, and let me know if you have any books that you are particularly interested in reading in 2023. And that's pretty much all I got for you for this video, so thank you for watching, and I will see you guys next time.